Strategy, to me, when you boil it down to first principles, I think is three things. Number one is it's an assessment of what you think truth is today. Number two, it's a prediction of what you think truth is tomorrow. And number three is it's a decision of how you're going to place your resources amongst any number of different alternatives based on your prediction of truth. Classically, the kind of approach to strategy towards establishing truth, predicting what truth would be, and then kind of identifying the different kind of options for the placement of your limited resources was a human-mediated process, where through the course of years, a class of people would be promoted into a company based on their expertise, their history, their control of context, in order to think about what kind of truth was in the world, what from their subjective judgment it was going to be in 5 years, what the kind of list of potential options were based on that interpretation of future, and then how the organization should spend its resources accordingly. What markets it should go into, what products it should develop, what people it should hire in order to kind of satisfy that mission. I think data has changed how you do that. Measurement has replaced intuition in terms of establishing truth and kind of replacing the classical form. Algorithmic prediction, which is essentially the kind of use of the available bodies of data in order to predict the future, has replaced expertise inference. So inference by experts in terms of what's going to happen tomorrow, or not maybe replaced, but complemented that in the form. And three is, I think, data in terms of the kind of broad accessibility of digital representation of events has kind of broadened our ability to understand what different alternatives are available to us, and then the kind of value of those different alternatives through simulation and estimation. And so I think when we say, like, what is the nature of strategy in a data-driven world, and I think the fundamentals of strategy stay the same. What changes is the means under which you do that and the set of information and personnel that you have available at your disposal in order to do it. There has been an important systemic change in polling that has really kind of compromised the ability of phone-based political research. So number one is just a replacement of telephone technology. People are dropping their landlines and they're using mobile phones. And two is declining response rates across all forms of survey measurement. It used to be 10% of people that you would call would answer a survey. Now it's 1% of people who answer a call, or even less. So that's a phenomenal variance in response rates that you have to take into account. And if you don't know what it's likely to be, your measurements can be way off in terms of the panel of folks that you're getting. What does this mean for kind of survey and polling research that companies do, which is the principal means that they use to understand consumer attitudes and behaviors? A few things that you need to think about. First is, we work with a lot of companies, and survey research is often presented as a set of bars and charts in PowerPoint. If you're a company, you need to kind of invite healthy skepticism into the process and say, what is behind these bar charts? How was the data collected? How representative is this of the general population or of my consumers? Is there any bias present? What is the projected uncertainty around these bars in the PowerPoint chart that I'm getting? Because if the uncertainty is wide, I need to know that, because that's going to help me interpret whether I go whole hog towards this or whether or not I have a more kind of risk-abating strategy. So I think what people need to do is one is build literacy into their organizations in terms of understanding it. Two is healthy skepticism towards what it actually means. And then finally, I think this is how our company is interpreting that, is we need to make some big changes in how this type of research is done. We're making changes in terms of moving more towards multimodal research, using kind of controlled online panels that we can use to assess this. We're trying to join that to larger bodies of population-level consumer files so that we can detect where those biases occur. Companies, whether it's with their consultants or the consultants themselves, are going to have to think deeply about how they are revising their survey research to take these biases into account, because they are structural and not just unique to the political sector. Data is not a religion, right? It is not panacea. Data isn't going to tell you what data you need to listen to. Humans are going to tell you what data you need to listen to. And so I think there is some kind of symbiosis in terms of like executive leadership and strategy, and then the kind of what you're listening to, what predictions you're making with what levels of certainty around that information, and then what decisions you think you can observe based on that. I mean, data has some natural superiorities to humans for some things. It can see more. I can observe more from kind of the growing body of information technology, sensor networks, traffic lights, et cetera. Humans just don't have the kind of eyes wide enough to see what's going on within a traffic network. But again, the human has to articulate what's important, what it should measure. I think the Obama campaign is a good model for how the nerds work with the experts, right? I was the nerd, and David Axelrod and David Civis were the experts. And I think what was special about that circumstance is that we both approached our conversation with the other with appropriate humility. And what I saw the Davids do that I don't think the data did do, which was an understanding of human story and human narrative. The data isn't going to produce that for you, but I saw the way that they were understanding narrative and story. I saw the way that they were saying, all right, I see this in your data about these populations, and the 2 questions you've answered, but here are the 5 I'm not clear about, and how can you answer me those? Here are some of the limits that I see in terms of your measurement and how you need to think about that. And then conversely, I would ask the same questions of them. I think in terms of the relationship between kind of the nerds and the experts, that was a pure example for me of how we used our kind of mutual intelligence, 1 of kind of data-driven, and 2 kind of based on a human experience of story and context in order to kind of execute properly in what we thought was a good strategy.